Good afternoon. I'm Annalee Nutter, Superintendent for Fort McMurray Public Schools, and you are tuning in for Session 5 of the Superintendent's Learning Series for Parents. Thank you for joining us today. Our topic is going to be calendar, so thank you. So we will go dig right into it. As I said, budget calendar, how the calendar is developed, and other miscellaneous budget items tonight. I will also go over any questions we had from last session, and then there was a few items from last year's thought exchange that I just want to touch base on. So that will be our agenda for this evening. And I am not aware of any questions from my presentation last week. If you didn't get a chance to tune in last week, I did get into the specifics of school budgets. So you might want to go back to the YouTube channel and look for session number 4, and you'll be able to listen to that anytime. So let's get right into the calendar, the school calendar. The calendar is a collaborative effort, and it must be this way between us and the Catholic School District because we're sharing costs of busing. And so we want to make sure that we're both in school at approximately the same days on the calendar to avoid any extra expenses. Every day that we have school, when Fort McMurray Catholic School Division does not, is going to be an added cost for us, as I've already said. Every bus that we have costs about $70,000 a year, and we have, give or take, 30 buses, and some of these are shared with the Catholic Division. And I went deep into busing last time, so if you want more on busing, please go to session 4 and listen to it. All right, so the cost actually, just for busing on a day where we have school and the Catholic Division does not, is about $10,000. That's a rough estimate. And that's just for busing. There's other expenses as well that we would have to dish out if we had a day of school when they did not. But I just wanted to highlight the busing for you. So together, the Catholic School Division and the Public School Division bring forward our ideas. We bring forward ideas of calendar considerations, what those should be, and we negotiate back and forth over a period of weeks. We take the drafts back and forth to our stakeholders and to the board, and then we return and meet to go over the feedback that we got and continue our negotiating with one another. So we want to come to a consensus on agreeing which days should be school operational days and which ones should be instructional days. Last year, the board passed 2 calendars. This was unusual. However, moving forward now, we will be back to that one calendar. We wanted to get ahead of ourselves. So the current calendar year for 2022-2023 is on the left. And then they also passed one for 23-24 with just the major holidays outlined, as well as the start and end dates to help the high schools mostly, because in part of their planning process for setting up what courses they're going to offer and their teachers and assigning those classes to teachers, this helps in their planning process. The sooner they know what the calendar year looks like, the better it is for them to be able to do their scheduling and also to budget and staff for their class sizes better. So the board will now consider the draft calendar for 2023-24, which outlines the instructional and the operational days. If you look right now on the calendar on the right, there is no set operational and instructional days yet. So that's the next step. And this is work that is done in the Human Resources Department. So the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources and Administration takes the calendar and looks at it, works with her within her department and with the senior leadership team to talk about some talking points that she can take over to talk with her counterpart and the superintendent at the Catholic School Division. And they'll look at a draft calendar. The board also will look at draft calendar assumptions in their February board meeting and will approve the final calendar at the March board meeting. And from that point forward, at some point in time, probably by late April, they are also going to be looking at the 24-25 school year calendar to draft major holidays and start and end dates, much like they did this year. So when we're developing the calendar, what we try to ensure is that our breaks are spread throughout the year and that they're not piled up into peak times. Because this, of course, will help the students and staff by giving them the time that they need away from studies to give them that mental health break. And there are natural breaks which surround each Christmas and Easter break. We know that. We know that Easter break often begins or involves Good Friday being off because it's a statutory holiday. We also know that where these holidays lie changes from year to year. And every once in a while, they move a little bit further, or there's a bigger effect on our school holidays. And I'll get into that in a second. But you can see by looking at this current school year calendar that we've tried to make sure that everything's not piled into 1 month as a holiday. So this is the 23-24 school calendar. There's also breaks that aren't in our control in any given school year. And those would be, for example, our teachers' convention. So teachers' convention is not set by our division because a number of divisions attend. So that is out of our control. So if Easter is close to teachers' convention, we might look at what we did this year. In this calendar in front of you, you can see February 29th and March 1st. That is our teacher convention days. And so when you look further down in March, the 29th is an early Easter next year. The 29th is Good Friday. And so rather than having teachers convention, coming back for 3.5 weeks, and then going on another long break, we decided to extend that. So we will still have a long weekend, but it's not going to be the full week until 2 weeks later on April 15th to 19th. You know, the kids are just getting into the routine of things and they're just starting to get into their lessons deeper. And so interrupting them with another week off at that point, we felt would be better if we delayed it. We still have that long weekend, as I mentioned. And another time that this move in the calendar sometimes impacts us is in September. Sometimes September long weekend is like September 2nd or September 3rd, and sometimes it's the 7th or the 8th. And so we consider that as well. We think, okay, if it's September 2nd or 3rd, maybe we could start after the long weekend. But if it was September 7th or 8th, that's getting to be a little bit late because we don't have those front end days. We have a certain number of days that we have to have in our school calendar. And so by not starting earlier, we have to take those days and put them in somewhere else. So that would mean maybe shortening Easter break, shortening Christmas break, just taking some of those holidays away if we were going to start later in September. Another consideration that we must make when we're developing the calendar is that which is required by Alberta Education. So on the slide in front of you, you can see that Alberta Education tells us all grade 1 to 9 students have to have 950 hours of instruction per year. And then high school students have to have at least 1,000 hours of instruction per grade. And so we make sure every year when we're doing our budgets with our school administrators, when they are calculating everything, one of the things they have to calculate in their spreadsheet is the minutes per day, and make sure that we have the correct number of minutes and that we're meeting those requirements for instruction. So on average in the Fort McMurray Public School Division, our grade 1 to 9 students have about 330 instructional minutes per day. And so over 174 instructional days, that's 957 hours a year. And you're probably thinking, well, what does instruction mean? What are instructional times? And so that is any time the teacher is in front of the class teaching, basically. It doesn't mean convention days or professional development days. It doesn't include planning days or staff meeting days or lunch breaks or recesses or breaks in between classes. Those are not considered instructional minutes. So the board approves the number of operational days and the number of instructional days. As I mentioned, elementary has 957 hours, so we're 7 hours over, and our high schools have 1,009 hours a year, which is 9 hours over. So we have a little bit of wiggle room there. From here, we have to consider which 2 days are going to be our days in lieu for parent-teacher interviews. So we have those usually outside of school hours, and they are 3 hours a day for 2 days. So that's a 6-hour day. And so the teacher, because they've worked those extra hours, as a part of their collective agreement, they will get those days in lieu. We also try to balance the number of instructional days per semester. And this is important for high schools because you don't want one semester to have 100 days and the second semester to have 80 days. That's a big difference. That's 20 less days of teaching for a certain subject in the second semester if you do that. So in this example, you can see for this school year, we have 86 instructional days in semester 1 and 88 in semester 2. And that's not a big gap, and so we said that would be fine. It's just 1 or 2 days extra, but it's not that huge difference that's going to matter for some of those subjects that require a lot of instructional minutes. Part of our cycle of continuous improvement is ensuring that we have time for professional learning. And this is also part of Alberta Education's assurance framework process. We have 13 professional learning Fridays this year, which are aligned to our priorities. And that's where we're building capacity for staff so that they can better serve students and increase their capacity and improvement in their academic areas. The Catholic School Division has a few more than we do, but these 13 Fridays are operational days, so they are not instructional days. Which simply means the school's open, but the students aren't required to be there because the teachers are learning. And so a little bit more on PLF and what happens during PLF time. One of the domains, and on the left you'll see a series of circles. And each of these 5 areas is something that Alberta Education wants us to comment on in our education plans. And then we later look at the results and see how we're doing in each of these areas. So one of the domains that we have to include, as you can see, I've circled it in red, is about teaching and leading. So how are we as a division developing quality teachers and leaders in our division? And what does that look like? And that is what we use our PLF Fridays for, or our Professional Learning Fridays, and to develop our staff so that they can better support those students. And we're building capacity in both this way. So each school develops a detailed, comprehensive plan that's aligned to our priorities as a division and also to any local context that might be at their school. And a summary of these plans should be under the About tab on your school's website page. So if you go to your school's website, go to the tab that says About and scroll within there. You should be able to find something similar to the diagram on the right, which is Timberlea Public Schools Professional Learning Cycle. And as I said, this is just a summary. The principal and the staff get together and determine what their detailed plan is going to look like for the entire day for each of those days, and they submit those to my office and we review it and we talk about okay, this is great, I like what you're doing here, it aligns to the literacy goals that you have, and that aligns to the division's goals. So we look for alignment and we look to see that what they're doing is helping students improve in areas that we've said and agreed on as a team of school administrators and senior leaders. And you can ask the principal at any point in time to give you some information about what the teachers are doing on those days if you would like. When it comes to local context, as I said, I don't know if it's on this one in particular, but I know that Timberlea is a micro-society, and so they might have some learning in that area that the teachers need to do in order to impact their students. So in Timberlea, they may have that as part of their professional learning plan, where other schools wouldn't because they aren't micro-societies. A final note on the calendar, we have heard from stakeholders about staggered entry, and we agree with you. We feel that this will not be required for most students moving forward. Those staggered entry days were provided during COVID to help us get settled and help the students on their return back to school after being out for a while, to help with their anxiety and help them become familiar with the school again. ECDP in kindergarten will definitely move back to what they used to do for their staggered days, and those messages will come to you closer to that time. But just know in the past that kindergarten and ECDP have always had staggered entry of some type. And we will be suggesting only 1 day of staggered entry, and that may only be for a couple of grades. So it might just be for someone like the grade 1s and the grade 7s, because they are the new kids on the block when it comes to being in the building for the first time for the full day. This isn't confirmed for sure, but I wanted you to know that the staggered entry days will no longer happen in the fashion that they have for the last 2 or 3 years. We're just beginning to start the feedback process on calendar, and we look forward to hearing from you. So your school council is one place where you can share your feedback. And I know that pretty soon the schools are going to start talking about calendar, and they're going to ask for parent feedback, and they're going to also be developing their education plans, and they're going to ask you for feedback there too. So there's that way that you can provide feedback. In addition to, as I've already mentioned at the beginning of this, I have the thought exchange, which has been designed and will be coming out next week. Just because it doesn't talk specifically about calendar doesn't mean you can't bring that into the conversation. So open up the conversation next week about calendar as you feel fit, and or any other subjects that you want. That should be coming home to you Monday, and it will be open for about a week or so. Now that's the end of the calendar segment. It was pretty simple explanation because it's pretty simple. It's simple to explain, but it's very complex when all the wheels start moving because we have so many stakeholder groups that we have to get feedback from. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen and provide that feedback when it comes time. The last section of this presentation, I would like to share other stakeholder suggestions that came through in last year's thought exchange. There were some comments that were made that made me think there was some misunderstanding, so I just want to clarify some things. I know in the last thought exchange, it was suggested that we cut some positions down here at division office. And I presented this at the parent engagement sessions in the last, couple. That cuts have actually been made at division office over the last couple of years, even though we've had an increase in enrollment in this at the same time. And we're starting to, some department areas are starting to feel the stretch of their staff, stretching to the limits to try and cover everything. But we will continue to keep an eye on that. With increased enrollment, we know always comes some kind of increased needs in each of the departments. And so we've done what we could in order to maintain workloads that were bearable without compromising the quality of the work that's being done. And there are a number of requirements for reporting to Alberta Education which call for some of these staffing needs. So I don't want you to think we haven't been making cuts. We did make some cuts over the last few years, and so we're doing the best that we can. Thank you. Another question that we had was about teacher salaries. Maybe not so much a question as a comment. So this was something that came up through the thought exchange. Many people thought that staff should be paid more for the work that they do and the hard 2 years that they just went through. Hard 2 or 3 years, I guess you could say, because last year was also difficult. So what happens is what we pay our teachers is determined through contract negotiations. So both provincially and locally. We don't have the ability to pay more or less based on performance or to provide bonuses to the staff. We have to follow the collective agreement that they have signed, and this holds true for educational assistants as well as teachers. Someone had some comments about recruitment. We need better teachers. We need more teachers. What are you doing for recruitment? So I just wanted to give you an update on that. Again, we do have a finite amount of funding for teachers. So recruitment would not be to go beyond our budgeted allotment. We have to keep in line with what we've been given to pay for our staff as we were directed by Alberta Education. We can't just say, okay, we have teachers, let's go get extra, because it ties to that collective agreement and it ties to the budget. We can't just run out and buy teachers. We don't have extra money laying around. we're recruiting where we can, and we're thinking about what our needs are. So we put out a non-binding intent form to all of our staff in January. So they get this form in their email and they tell us what they would like to do next year. Maybe they want to transfer, maybe they are taking maternity leave, maybe they want to resign, maybe they want to retire. So they tell us what their intent is, and then we send another one out after Easter break to get a better idea. After we've done a little bit of recruiting, we want to make sure we're still in line with what our needs are. So we do a second intent form, and then our HR team determines what's still needed. Where do we need to go? So currently, I know that our human resources team is going to the East Coast. They're going to Mount St. Vincent and the University of New Brunswick, as well as the University of Alberta next week. So they'll go to a few places like this. This is just their first step. They'll go to multiple universities to see what they can find. One word of caution, though, is that, the world is seeing a shortage in teachers. And so this affects everyone. So we'll see what we can find and cross our fingers that we get some great families coming to Fort McMurray. It would be great if you know anybody that wants a job in Fort McMurray. Maybe the husband wants to work out at site. If his wife is a teacher, we'd be more than happy to accommodate with an interview, and vice versa. Maybe it's the wife that works outside and the husband wants to come and be a teacher because they have the qualifications. And another comment was, hey, we're crowded. We need more space in the schools. What can you do about class size? Or we don't have any extra space to do any extra activities. We're all space is used to a maximum at our school. And I agree, some schools are definitely more crowded than others. But in order to be able to request another school, we have to show through our data that we have used all of the current space in our schools. And when that happens, then the government will consider new schools. So the utilization rate is what they're looking at. As far as adding portables, our Business and Finance Associate Superintendent monitors enrollment growth yearly, and he actually does projections for multiple years. And with this information, he can determine where the schools might need portables added or where we can remove portables from schools. Currently, we have some schools actually experiencing this construction. Some have been moved away from McTavish, and some are being added onto Christina Gordon and at Cole Dickensfield. So this will continue over time to assist with our space issues. This is something that has to be passed through Alberta Education again because it's a capital budget item and is part of the long-term planning process that we have and that they have. So the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Finance will monitor and share with the board as it's required. And so those were the random questions that I wanted to hit on. If you have any other topics that you feel you would like to hear more about when it comes to our operations as a school division, please send in an email to me. I would love to hear from you. And so that concludes our session for today. Thank you for joining us to learn more about the calendar and the few odds and ends that I had for you. We aren't going to be doing a thought exchange today. However, please forward your answers on the link below this video, or you can email me directly with your questions about calendar. Also, just want to let you know that we're doing a thought exchange, and that will be coming out next week, so watch for that. So you can give us some advice on what you think we can change in the division, or things we're already doing well, or maybe even things that you think we should be doing that we aren't doing. So thank you once again. Good night.